What's going on, guys? This is Foresight Capital, and today we're going to take a look at Palantir's price action for last week, as well as give my thoughts on where I think Palantir will trade over the next trading week. We'll also take a look at ARK Invest buying and selling operations for Palantir for the last trading week of 2020, and I'll clarify something that I mentioned in a previous video that I didn't give enough information on, and it really angered some of the viewers. Now, you may have noticed that I've got TradingView up here, and I plan for TradingView to be the charting platform of choice for this channel moving forward, as opposed to the Thinkorswim platform. This will allow me to share charts more easily and for you to download them to view yourself, mark up, or make any changes to without having to go back and watch the video and watch more ads. I also wanted to let you all know that I have a Discord in the works for this channel that will be launching over the coming days and weeks. It's almost ready, and it will allow us to have a bit more dynamic of a conversation on some of these topics that are ever so changing. Because the hardest part of this channel is that if you're watching a video that's a week and a half or 2 weeks old, a lot of times that information is outdated and we moved on to something else, so it could seem like the information being given is entirely incorrect. If you're able to join the Discord, this will allow us to update it in a little bit more real time and be a little bit more engaging with the audience. So I really hope that all of this brings you value, and if you're interested in that in the future and you haven't yet, give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing because it really helps this channel reach more people. So Palantir closed out the day at $23.53, which was down just over 6% on the day, and it had a pretty rough week overall. So we can see here that they've dipped below the 200 period and 50 period moving average, both of which were bearish, and I actually sold my entire Palantir position at an average price of $26.51 per share, right as they were dipping below the 200 period moving average, and mentioned in a previous video that I'm looking to buy back around $22.60 per share, but would consider buying at $24.60. So I've recreated this chart to the best of my ability on TradingView, and the yellow support line of $24.60 per share ended up being broken on New Year's Eve, and a continuation of the downtrend breaking below the 9 period moving average ultimately pushed the price down over 6% on the day. I'm now estimating that I'm going to re-enter this stock at $22.60, and my thoughts for next week are that we see a continuation of this sell-off back to $22.60 per share. That is pending any sort of news event, because as we've seen a lot with Palantir's price action recently, if there aren't any news events, there tends to just be a lot of low volume days with a whole lot of selling. If we take a look at the volume chart down here, we can see that the past couple of trading days where they had pretty big sell-offs were actually very low volume days, and on higher volume days the price of Palantir tends to increase. What that means is that buyers just really aren't buying the stock, and the only price action that's going on these low volume days is selling. That means that probably a lot of retail traders are taking their profits or cutting some of their losses, and the big banks and big buyers and sellers just aren't coming in and buying on those days. So I personally think we see a continuation of this decline back down to $22.60. And one of the things that I think could really save the stock from hitting this level is that it is registering as pretty oversold, which is when a lot of retail buyers and a lot of just other buyers in general will see that the price could likely be undervalued and start coming in and buying and propping up the price. But we don't have a whole lot more left to fall. And a lot of you asked in the comments why I actually sold all of my shares rather than averaging down if I'm bullish on the stock. And let me be clear, I am bullish on Palantir in the long run, but I prefer to protect my capital. And if I feel very strongly that the price is going to take a downtrend, it's better to just sell and buy back at a lower level than to actually continuously throw capital at the stock and potentially add to a losing position and end up losing more money. That's one thing to keep in mind as you grow in your trading career, and one thing that I've been burnt badly on before is that stocks don't always return to their previous price, or they may not for a long time. And if you just keep adding more and more capital to a position, it's very easy to have a whole lot of money underwater that you just don't end up wanting to sell, and you just earn very dismal returns on that capital for a long time until the stock comes back or until you decide to take a loss. So my personal strategy is to typically sell out of the stock and buy back at a lower price rather than continuing to add to a position. Now, I wanted to talk about ARK Invest buying and selling operations within Palantir for the week because I made a video early in the week talking about how Palantir had some shares sold from the ARKW ETF. And a lot of you couldn't see this buying and selling action, so I wanted to highlight it here. This is lucidtracking.com. I pay for a premium membership. I think it's $5 a month, and I have no affiliation with Lucid Tracking at all, but it does allow me to see the buys and sells every single day of ARK Invest ETFs. If you're looking at other sources, they may only show weekly aggregates, which would give you misinformation on the daily action. So as we can see here, ARK Invest did sell $180,000 worth of shares for Palantir on December 29th. And what I failed to mention in the video was that it's likely some sort of tax loss harvesting or taking capital gains, depending on how they indicated that the shares were, whether they're FIFO or LIFO, and how they ultimately wanted to take the profit or loss on the shares. And I didn't really mention that. I just had mentioned that Palantir was having shares sold out of ARKW, and that irritated a lot of the viewers. I didn't intend to be misleading in any way, and in fact, they've since bought $215,000 worth, which basically replaces the number of shares of Palantir within the ARKW portfolio that they sold, and they're actually now at an all-time high holding of Palantir. One thing that I want to note, though, is that they have allowed the weight of Palantir within the ARKW ETF to dwindle just a bit, and part of that is due to the fact that the actual price of Palantir is falling, so as they're buying, it's still not taking up as much weight within the portfolio. But if we look back at the beginning of December, we can see that Palantir was trading at around $23.85 and had a 0.63% weight within ARKW ETF, and now has a 0.59% weight and trading right around the same price, just ever so slightly lower, meaning that as the price of Palantir declines, they're not necessarily dollar for dollar adding back to keep the weight up of Palantir. That doesn't necessarily mean that ARK Invest is bearish on Palantir, and it's hard to get a direct comparison because, again, Palantir is trading slightly lower in price with a slightly lower weight. But if we ended up doing the math, Palantir would have somewhere around a 0.6% to 0.61% weight with the same number of shares that they currently hold of Palantir versus what they held back in the beginning of December, meaning that they've let the weighting of Palantir decline ever so slightly, and it's always a work in motion. That's all I was trying to highlight in that video, was that they're not necessarily replacing the number of shares equally as the value of Palantir declines over the past couple of trading weeks. But that doesn't mean that they're selling shares consistently. It also doesn't mean that they're bearish on the stock at all. In fact, it would appear that they're still bullish because they've increased their number of shares to an all-time high. I just wanted to highlight the difference in weighting because that's the most important thing to pay attention to with a stock inside of an ETF. They do consistently buy these shares. They don't stop buying and they don't day trade on a daily basis. But if they stop buying as many shares to replace the decline in value, that could mean that they're leaning out of favor of a stock. I don't think that that's the case necessarily with Palantir because they've kept the weighting roughly equal and let it fall just a few basis points, but just something to keep an eye on. And I really apologize for not making that entirely clear in the previous video. But that's kind of my thoughts for the week, is that potentially we see a continuation of the fall to 2260, which is where I'm personally targeting to buy Palantir. I feel like that gives a good risk to reward ratio and is close enough to where analysts think the price should be, which, by the way, analysts have been wrong on this stock for quite some time. But I think it gives us a good entry point for the stock that gives a slightly better risk to reward ratio. And I think that that can happen over the next couple of trading days, meaning ultimately it's not going to be that long that I'm not holding Palantir because, again, I am bullish on the stock. I don't want anyone to think that I'm not, but I'm not recommending anybody buy or sell because I'm not a financial analyst or expert by any means. I'm just a guy on the internet. But that's just kind of my thoughts. And then my price target from there would realistically be to take some off at all-time highs at around 33.50 and let the rest continuously ride. And if I scale into the position well enough when I buy at 22.60 and take profit at all-time highs, that's going to be very close to making 100% of my overall investment back, meaning the rest of it is just free money to continuously ride in Palantir throughout time. So let me know your thoughts on this video in the comments section below. And again, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so, because the Discord will be up very soon for this channel so that we can have more dynamic conversations. There will be a section for cryptocurrencies, technical analysis, fundamental analysis, and anything else you want to talk about. I've got it all laid out, and I would really appreciate you joining us. So thanks for watching till the end. Again, give this video a thumbs up if it brought you value, and we'll catch you in the next one.